tonight. I got a special guest with me. His name is Tim. Tim, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
All right, how you doing? My name is Tim Grant. I am a teacher, a youth director. Been born and raised in Fort Wayne. So here I am, just sharing my life experiences and trying to help you.
Hey man, thanks for being on the show. I think we'll just jump right into it. All right.
All right.
You ready?
Yeah,
You sure?
I'm on it.
Okay.
Let's get it.
All right, let's do it. So man, what's going on in your life right now? What's going on? Like, what is some things that's new? I haven't saw you in a while.
Yeah. Just trying to focus on the gig, man. Focus on some of my businesses.
Right.
And, try to get the new year together, working on my spiritual, my mental, and of course my physical. So,
Okay.
trying to remain copacetic.
Right. Now you say you working on your businesses. What businesses are those?
Okay. Yeah. So I got a few. One.
You a busy man.
Hey man. If you're not, I said they say not moving.
Right.
Yeah, or something. So yeah, I got my detail business where I detail cars, interior and exterior. Working on that. Just trying to get, my feet kind of going on that one. So I also have a security business.
Oh, I didn't hear about this one. This is new.
Yeah, so I've been had it. I just ain't really utilize it a lot. So some people need officers for private parties, or they want to have security for certain venues, or even personal bodyguards. I own leisure, so that helped me out as well.
Okay. Now I know you got the DJ business too, which
Yeah.
that's a nice deal, man. You do a really good job when you do that. I like it. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
It's just as like when I see what you doing with the DJ stuff, it boggles my mind because I don't understand how it all works, right? I don't understand the intricacies of it. So when I see you do it, it's like, man, I'll be like looking like, how do you, what does that do? What is that? I should just ask you, but you know how it is.
Right.
It's a little bit of pride when it comes to being a dude, right? So I just sit back and kind of watch like, how you do that,
Man, that was the same reason I got into DJing. I have a passion for music, so and all kinds of music. Interesting enough. And then I said, mixing the music with the people, being able to just be yourself. And I think that's a part of my passion behind it, because I'm able to get out amongst other people and look at the diversity, look at the groups. And I was always interested because, a lot of times you get the people like, man, who's playing this music? Like, I probably could do this.
Right.
And, then I started watching. I was like, I could for sure do this. For sure do it. So I started looking at it when we go to clubs. Start talking to people. Start asking, hey, so what do I need to do? How do you get this? What is it? And really started watching. So a lot of times when I went out, I would always be at the booth and I would be watching. So
right.
A lot of times when I'm doing my security gig and I'm doing stuff at a club or a night bar or something, I go and watch the DJ, just see what he's doing. So
okay. So you stole their intellectual property. I do it all the time. That's what YouTube is, right? Yeah. You can just learn about what somebody else is doing and, figure out if you can do it or not. And, I got this whole idea off of YouTube, of course. And, I don't think I could have done it without the help from YouTube. So, it's tough, man. It's tough. And, out here, we definitely need a lot of different opportunities. So that's why I asked about the different things that you do, because you seem like you always are doing something new. Like, it's Tim on Facebook one day, and then the next thing you come up, it's a dry cleaner business. It's a dry cleaning business. You got a true entrepreneurial spirit, man, and that's really cool, definitely. So we on this show to kind of talk about trauma and some cycles of abuse, trauma, different things that people have to deal with, women, men, children, etc. And that's tough because I kind of feel like, if it wasn't for some of the things that I had to deal with in my own life, I could potentially, be somewhere different in my life. And I like where I'm at. I love where I'm at. I like the space. I'm really appreciative of, what God has given me and, just even the past has given me. But I can't help but look at the deficit sometimes and see like, man, if certain things didn't happen in my life, I might be somewhere different. That doesn't mean it's good or bad. It's just like I almost have grief missing those opportunities when I look back at those times when I went left when I should have went right. What do you think about that?
I think a lot of time when we have this understanding that you're supposed to learn from your mistakes, right? That's the saying. You're supposed to learn from your mistakes. But I think that if you don't understand what you did and the way that you were moving as you were growing was a quote mistake, there's no way to go back and evaluate what you should have done differently. But a lot of time people don't understand you are who you are from your past, and from the situations that happened with you in your past. I think it's vital to really take a look at where you're at now, right? As we reflect, because I don't know how many people really sit back and reflect. So take some time, like write some things out. Why am I at where I am now? Like ask yourself, and then see, is this a healthy place for you, right? Is this something that you desire,
right?
Something that you want to be, and then look back at your past and say, okay, why did X, Y, Z happen, right? So if you had some major trauma issues, allude to that. Like, is that still present in your life? Is it still prevalent in your life?
So it's real easy though to like look in your past as a successful person and say like, or at least moderately successful, any type, you got a family, you got a car, you got a job, that's pretty much success. But I always worry about those people that they never got to achieve that success and they stuck in that trauma. And usually, when you stuck in that those deep feelings of trauma, that deep history of cycles of all types of things that went on in your life, that's very tough to get out of. I mean, that is what a lot of people who are impoverished are dealing with mentally, So bringing it back to children, I'm just going to read like some of these stats on childhood trauma. How about that? Is that cool?
Yeah.
All right, so it says 61% of adults report experiencing at least one adverse childhood experience, such as abuse, neglect, or household dysfunction. I probably went through all of those. I don't know about you, but I probably touched through a few of those, definitely. I'm sure I did, 100%.
Yeah.
And I was able to get out of it, but only because of some opportunities that I see that some people don't get, right? I mean, life is kind of like a gamble. Sometimes you just get lucky, sometimes you don't. So with those adults who have experienced that trauma, I mean, have you ever had to deal with any type of those things that I just pointed out yourself?
Yeah, actually. And it took me to be in my adult years to realize that I did.
Sorry.
I didn't realize that the things that happened to me as a young man, as a child, affected me as an adult today. And those are some of the things that I've had to wrestle with. I've had to go back, like I was speaking on, saying and talking about reflection. Some of the bigger things is I think that it's so common in a way, but we kind of just gloss over it, and that's I would say, having mommy and daddy issues.
Right.
So having a mommy issue is, you can equate that to not having a good relationship with your mother, or having a daddy issue. I think it's the absent father idea, right? So especially among African Americans, and that idea of, it's not all like that, but you just got to look at statistics, and when you're looking at that.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, we are, in many different instances, we are like 10, 12, 14 times more likely to, have experienced trauma as children. And ultimately that turns into dysfunction as adults. So I can definitely say it's one thing for physical abuse, and I guess people who are commenting can maybe speak on physical abuse versus emotional abuse. But for me, emotional abuse is like that thing that really holds on forever, because there's times that I can think back in my own past where I went through some problems as a kid with emotional abuse, and it still haunts me to this day. So yeah, man, I mean, we just have a lot of that going on in our community still, because it's that cycle. It never goes away.
You gotta think about it. When we have emotional abuse, that stems from things that I believe that happen when you're young. So if you're in a cycle, right, the only way to break a cycle is by changing what was adverse in your past. So you have to become different than what happened to you. So it's the same kind of like old adage, right? If you grew up with an absent father, right? So most people who grow up with an absent father, they say, guess what? I don't want that for my child.
Right.
So they're going to do everything that they can to be in their child's life, regardless if that's actually a good thing or a bad thing, depending on what type of presence are you in your child's life. Are you kind of there sometimes? Are you saying that you're there? Because a lot of times, if we don't address it from what we were doing, we'll still end up doing the things that were done to us as children.
So what do you think are some of those things? Like, you go through these different problems as a kid. How does that turn into something negative when you're adults? Well, what are those things that adults get into that are reflective of a bad childhood?
So if you have an addiction, right?
Okay.
What kind of addiction do you have? So you kind of want to take it back. But you have to start from the beginning. And a lot of times we kind of block out things that happen to us emotionally, that affect us negatively, right? Because we don't want to keep those things in our minds. So because we block them out, it doesn't mean that we address it. So we take it with us. So it's just like putting a Band-Aid over a wound that is infected. You may cover it up for a moment. You may get some slight, relief, but you don't really deal with the infection. So you still taking it with you. So as you're an adult, you'll end up still doing those things. So your addiction that you've seen your mom or your dad or your grandmom or your grandmother have, you taken that with you because it was passed down to you. You're taking everything that you see and do, and that came from whoever you were around. That's all you were doing as a kid because you have no other way of learning.
But then when you couple it in with the fact that we really don't want to address mental health in our own communities. We don't want to go to therapy, counseling. We don't want to do anything healing or spiritualistic, in nature. I think that just adds to so much that we have to deal with. And ultimately, to me, it funnels into our relationship patterns as well.
Of course.
I mean, if you get online right now, and I keep going to this because if you just take a step back, I like to use the analogy where you look at the fish tank from the outside versus being a fish on the inside. When you're just looking at it from the outside in, we have all these people all across the internet. The internet is literally flooded with relationship conversations, and not just ones about education, ones about dysfunction. Right? That's the entertainment landscape now. It's just the dysfunction of relationships that comes from just all of these different things that people have to deal with. When I listen to like some of these fellas and I listen to some of these ladies on there, and they are making these crazy statements about what they expect in relationships, what they, these different types of thoughts that they're just unnatural to relationships. Usually they boil around money, sex, selfishness, right? All the things that don't even go with relationships anyway. You can just see that dysfunction came from a parent. So on that note, what do you think that parents need to realize with their children's upbringing so that we can break those cycles that we see?
Man, that's a great question. As a person who has worked and mentored many youth, been in situations where you can watch parenting, kind of like that fish tank analogy. You can see it. You have to know the parent, and then you have to understand that their trauma plays a part in how they raise their children now. Right. So, for instance, if you had a person or a parent who grew up poor, right? They grew up without always needing, and they get to be an adult, and they get to be in a position of wealth. What's going to happen? They're going to do the exact opposite of what they needed. So when you are growing up, and I speak from this point personally because I didn't have it a lot growing up, but I had the basics. Right. So my idea, which I didn't want to lose, was the idea of earning what I got. When you get in a position where you have money, where you have the tangible, physical things that you didn't have as a child, your parenting changes to kind of reflect what you didn't do, so what you can do now, right? So your children are going to say, hey, Mom, I want this. You're going to, okay, I'm going to make sure little Bobby has this. I'll make sure little Susie has this. But because of that, that doesn't teach them anything, really, because you're just giving it to them.
Right.
Because you didn't have it. Instead of letting them know that they need to be able to earn those things and make them kind of have some respect for attaining those things that you have. So it's not bad to give your children things. I'm not saying that. But if you don't train them up to where it's like, hey, all right, I need to show you how to start getting some things for yourself. I need to show you or teach you how to start doing things for yourself. Like, you're going to have to earn this.
Right. Because
what'll happen is you'll take this idea, because every time you're going to go back in your mental trauma state, your emotional trauma state, oh man, I didn't do this. This didn't happen for me. I.e. Christmases, i.e. holidays, birthdays, all those things that may not have happened for you. You're going to go over and above and beyond for those people because you simply didn't have that happen to you.
Right. So back to that relationship side of things, because I think that's something that a lot of people want to learn, want to understand too out there, is like, why is there so much dysfunction in relationships stemming from childhood trauma and abuse and things like that? And it states that 50% of trauma survivors report difficulty maintaining healthy relationships, citing trust and intimacy barriers. And then emotional and physical abuse survivors are at a higher risk for relationship dissatisfaction and infidelity. And those are all coming from like studies. So I mean, and if you couple that with the fact that these people, all of us who are having these issues, right, with this dysfunction, we're raising children and we're bringing the same things that we dealt with, just like you said, it's coming right back around. Your addiction to things that you went through, you're not really fixing it. You put a Band-Aid on it and you're just giving it right back to your children. So we got these children who are growing up through this stuff right now. If you've got infidelity problems, your children witness that. If you got addiction problems, your children witness that. Everything that we see is observed and taken in. I've lived through it, and I've had to fight very hard as an adult to not engage in that. And it's so tough too, and I don't think people get it unless they grew up through it, right? I don't think they understand. I think the person with a good family will look at this and be like, No, they just making choices. No, it takes a lot of brain power to not take what you witnessed, what you observed, what you went through, and put it back out into the world. It's tough to do. It's tough.
You have to think subconsciously. You do these things that you end up receiving. So from the very beginning, when you look at a child from 1 to 8, 1 to 7, they're observing and they're learning from what they see because they don't know any different, right? So if they witness you having a anger issue, if they witness you having addiction, they're going to think immediately, because this is what they're observing, this is what we need to do. Now,
right,
you can say, okay, maybe later on down the road, oh no, that wasn't what I was trying to show you. But it's too late, because at that point, they already ascertained that this is what I need to do, because this is what I've learned. Everything that is learned is going to be that much more difficult to unlearn as an adult. So subconsciously is what I'm saying, that you may not have intentionally put that on your child, but because you did it, because the actions were what they saw, they're going to take that from you now.
Right. I mean, we got a lot to understand, and we have a lot of work to do as a culture, because our children are, at the most part, we have educational issues. We have issues with our children growing up in healthy relationship patterns, substance abuse at early ages, early pregnancy, all these different things that are factors of abuse and trauma growing up and dysfunction. And I mean, where does it end? Sometimes I sit back and I'm like, where does this end? I think I'm doing a good job fixing some of those generational problems so far in my life. But that was tough, because all along that pathway to get to a point where I could actually be successful, I was running into people with their own problems, right? Having relationships with people who had their own issues, their own traumas and things like that. So it really took, the thing that I think changed it for me was actually being more, caring more about myself. That was a tough thing to do, because when you come from abuse and when you come from problems and things like that, you tend to want to be protective of everybody and everything, and you fail to take care of yourself the way you should. I had to actually learn how to take care of myself mentally, physically, spiritually, not always tend to other people's needs, put myself first. A lot of us struggle with that. Have you ever struggled with that yourself? Or
Yeah, I do that naturally because I care about people. So because there is, I think maybe, I don't necessarily say 2 types of people, but you get one person who is completely selfless. They are always giving. They're always looking out. But then the bad part about that is there's no return on their investment for themselves. They don't know how to fill their bucket. So it's like having a well, and you're always giving, but you're not able to refill that well because you spend so much time giving that you never take any time to go get filled back up. But then there's the other side of the spectrum, where you have the person who's always taking, who's always looking to get, who's always looking to, hey, let me get this. Hey, how can I take this from you? How can I learn this from you? Or sometimes, again, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing it intentionally. They could be subconsciously doing it, but they don't realize that you've taken so much, you haven't even taken the time to literally give back what you've got. So I think I take those things, like I said, there's one end of the spectrum when you're a taker, and there's another end of the spectrum when you're a giver. You have to be able to come to the middle of the road and find a healthy balance for yourself, because it's important to be able to give, but you have to have a point for yourself where you can say, okay, I need some me time now. So you can continue to do what you've been given the ability to do.
But those people actually kind of merge together pretty easy in relationships. I noticed that, like, usually in a relationship, it's usually a giver and it's a taker, right? They're like perfect for one another, so they can continue that cycle of abusing each other, right? I mean, honestly,
that's the word you used, abuse, because
it's abusive. It's an abusive relationship pattern. I mean, I'm no therapist, I'm no counselor or anything like that. Sure. I just, I've just noticed that over the years, just from my own observations and the things that I went through, is like, it's cycles of abuse and it's actors in abusive situations. Like, they both play a pretty equal part. One will take because the other gives. The other will give more to be abused more. It's like, usually in a relationship, if I take something from you, you like, oh, I'm out of here, right? But when you get into relationships with people who you're attracted to in those types of relationships, it's usually like, I'm going to keep giving and giving and giving the more you abuse. It's never an end to it, because I think it has something to do with abandonment issues. I know for me, that's what it was. I had abandonment issues. Because of my mother and father separating earlier and my mom having issues with drug addiction and things like that, I felt like every relationship I was in, I had to hold on to for dear life, right? And that set me up to not actually take care of myself and to defend my own morals, my own standards, the things that will keep me successful. I was basically sacrificing myself for another person who was giving nothing back. And I know that I felt like it was always like a feeling like, if I just let go of this person for a minute, they gone forever. Right? And that's really, when you think about it, that sucks. Going back to that, man, that was the worst feeling ever that I could barely feel. But it's just like one of those things, I guess you have to go through it and you have to learn from it. And it did take me therapy, counseling, all those things to get through it, to learn from other people. Like, no, this is not normal. This ain't normal, what you're going through.
I think that's key, what you just said, is therapy. I think a lot of people in our community don't realize how crucial therapy will and can be for the Black and brown community. Mm-hmm. We have this idea that we don't need it because we'll be fine, or we have this idea that it is what it is mindset, right? Mm-hmm. So if your mindset tells you that you don't need it, then you're going to continue to overload yourself with ideas and notions that it is just what it is. I won't need any help. But you're never addressing the issue, which is why you keep going back and repeating the same mistakes that you do. I think it's so powerful when we find the ability to be vulnerable enough to say, I need help.
Right.
Because, especially coming from a Black man's perspective, we don't want to tell nobody we need help, right? That's not the cool thing to do. Mm-hmm. Young people, that's not the cool thing to go to somebody to say, I need help. We got to figure it out on our own, right? So I feel like what gives us energy, right, from those people who take and from those people who give, what fuels the giver, right?
You asking me?
No, I'm just, this is rhetorical.
Oh, okay.
What fuels the giver? What fuels the taker? So the people who give, what I've noticed is that they give because they see the joy out of the other person, right? Now, the taker, that can be kind of self-explanatory because they're receiving whatever it is that they're getting, and it's only for their gain, right?
Can I say something?
Of course.
Yeah. I don't think that people who are takers in relationships, I don't think that they are necessarily trying to hurt that person that they're with. I think that because of the abuse that they went through, because of the traumas that they had to deal with as children, I think what they are doing is they're using taking as a mechanism to self-sabotage the relationship that they're in, because that's what you do. You know, that's one of the deficits that you grow up with. When you grow up is watching every relationship fall apart. So subconsciously, you sabotage every relationship that you're in, right? So I don't necessarily think that those people are out to get anything, right? You'll see, I mean, think about this. You'll have someone with a really good person and have a great relationship with somebody, and they will leave for somebody who's worthless. And we always sit there and be like, how does that happen, right? Why did the lady leave a doctor for the drug dealer, right? Why, you know, I mean, I'm just saying, like, you know, I'm just giving that example. It could be the other way around. A guy leaves a really good woman for just some woman who he knows is not worth his while.
I mean, I think you have to take into account, too, why do people do what they do? We have people who are in relationships or just friendships. If I have a need and I've told you my need, say in the beginning, you get with the person, hey, this girl's awesome, she's great, she's attractive, she does this, I like the way she does this, and vice versa, right? Everything's cool. But then what happens? Because if you look at it over time, things start to kind of even out, right? You don't really do the same type of things you do anymore, right? You kind of fizzle out. And I think what happens when you get to that stage of things where things fizzle out is because you stop doing the things that you did when you were interested in that person in the beginning. So that goes back to the needs and the wants, and it goes back to the people who give and who take. So when you have a person who's a taker, right, and I'm not saying that takers are bad people, but at the end of the day, what is it that if you take so much and you don't give anything, that person, even though they may be the giver, they still need something.
Right.
So they have to get something on their return, because if not, then they're going to feel like, okay, you've given it all out. If you ain't got nothing left to give, what are you going to do? Right? So the person who's taking, they don't really know. And again, I think it goes back to subconscious. Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Because every return or every time I've got in a relationship, I've just take. And then when it's over, oh, okay, I'm going to go my way, you go your way. And then you find another person, boom, do the same thing. I take. Okay, good. Took everything from you. Boom. So now you had this idea that, oh, don't talk to Mike, don't talk to Bob, you just a taker. But this is what that person has done so much that this has become their norm. So if I don't have anybody, A, that's going to be able to talk to me, to say, hey, I see something. B, I have to be open enough to be willing to listen, to say, hey, this is an issue for me. I don't understand why things aren't being sustainable, why things aren't being consistent. So if I can't keep said person, there's got to be a reason for that, right?
Right.
So going back to the community, we have continually handed down this idea that I have to be tough, right? I can't open up. I can't be vulnerable, especially as a man.
Right.
And because if I do, then what? Am I going to get anybody that's going to help me? Am I going to get any type of guidance? I don't know, because we've always been, hey, be tough, don't break, don't cry, whatever. This is what's been handed down. We haven't been handed down in our community the fact that, hey, you need to be able to cry. You need to be able to open up. You need to be able to find a safe space. I feel like that's going to start turning things over to where we can have a conversation with whomever and say, hey, can we sit down and just talk about, hey, why things are going the way they're going, especially if you don't feel that they're going the right way that they need to go, and you feel some kind of way about yourself, and that other person feels some kind of way about yourself. You got to be able to want to talk about it. We just don't talk, right? So that's the first part. The second part is the segue here, Eric, is education.
Okay.
If we don't read, who's going to tell us that we need to learn this, right? So we got these ideas, we got counseling, we got therapy, we have all these tools to our advantage that we could use, but we don't use.
But we can't access them from an educational standpoint.
So you got to know about it in order to access it. And then you got to be really, hey, I had this tool that I could use at my disposal. But if I don't know what it is, I'm more than likely not going to do it because we need a person who's trusted.
I'm just thinking more so along the lines that it's emotional intelligence, right? That we are kind of lacking a lot of because most of us can read, most of us can write. Majority of us have been to college. A lot of black people go to college every year. Matter of fact, our women in our community have the highest college rates across the board, right? Kudos to them. But at the same time, without that emotional intelligence that we lack sometimes, we don't want to access that higher level of thinking where it's like, let me help myself. Let me do for myself by accessing therapy, by going to counseling, by, talking and being more social. It's even worse with men because we already come with the barrier of like the lone wolf kind of mentality. I'm picking on myself too. I can thrive by myself, literally. I put this whole thing together by myself, just sitting on the garage floor for like a year, right? Looking stupid. But I'm saying, like, we thrive on our own. But the more that I've matured, the more I've grown, I've tried to like reach out to more men and make social connections and build relationships because I see that us as men, especially black men, we are lacking that in a huge way. And I think honestly, I think that sets us up for bad relationships because think about it. If you are always by yourself, you always on your own and you don't build proper relationships with men around you, because women do it. They build great relationships. They're going to have them before they met you, during, and after when they kick your ass out the door. They're going to be talking to these same people. The people going to know your whole life. But with men, we don't. When we get in relationships, or even before that, we are closed off from each other. We find these people. We don't even bounce the idea of who this person is off another guy, right? We just go into a relationship wholehearted. We start to sacrifice. We start to adopt this mentality that, I got to protect this family. I got to do this. I got to do that. And then it sets us up in this really lonely space while you're with somebody where all you do is watch Sunday football, and the rest of your life is dedicated to serving this household that doesn't serve you. That's why I always push for guys like, man, let's go out. Let's go do something together. Let's play spades. We actually need that. But we just got to get to that point because that's where we are truly living. And we are missing out on a whole opportunity to actually network, build, come together, grow businesses together as men. One thing about men, when we come together, we are logical and we come up with things. We do projects together when we sit in spaces together. One more thing, I gotta say this before I forget because I've been wanting to say it, is when we was talking about enablers and we were talking about takers and we were talking about givers. In my mind, both play equal parts in enabling. Like, they both serve each other. No one's the victim in an abusive relationship. I don't believe so at all. Because each one of them have free will. Unless you're chained up, you have free will. Both should leave, right? The taker is taking everything from you. The giver is giving everything he or she has. What else is left? You should be out of there.
I think I could go several different directions, but just to kind of stay with that idea, it's takers and givers. I think
I'm stuck on that.
We are all both in some form, some way, capacity. There are certain things that we want to take. There are certain things that we give. I don't know how intentional we are about giving. I don't know how intentional we are about taking. But in order to have a thriving relationship, there has to be balance. Because I have to want to give you something. Because I want to see you happy at the end of the day. Okay. You should want to give me something because you should want to see me happy at the end of the day, right? Because why? The very basis of the foundation is I care and or love you at the end of the day. So because I care or love you, at the end of the day, I would like to see you happy. So that necessarily doesn't mean that I have to always give you stuff. I could be taking things from you. I could be taking things off of you, right? Because that's going to ease whatever you got going on. So I feel like, there has to be a balance. So there's got to be equal parts of taking and giving. So going back to what you were talking about, being a service dog. So
I feel like I got some harsh language with that.
I think the idea stems from the beginning of do your work on the front end. And that encompasses this. I need to know who you are. Meaning, I need to know what bull crap you done been through, what baggage you bring into the table, because everybody got some sort of baggage, especially in our adult life. It may not be a lot, it may be a lot, but you got something that you're bringing. So, for instance, I know a person who was bringing issues because, like you were alluding to, your situation with your wife, you're shocked that you could go out, right?
Right.
So, because said person could be in a relationship where the person went out and cheated on all the time, never came home on time, always was abusing her mentally, emotionally, physically, right? So now, if that person doesn't deal with that trauma, well, guess what? She's going to take it into her next relationship or his next relationship, because this is what is going on. This is the baggage that I'm talking about, right? So every time that you're a good person, you're a good dude, you're a good girl, but every time you leave, he worried about, hey, where you going? How long you going to be gone? Because it ain't got nothing to do with you. It's all on this person who has not healed, who has not been able to go through certain things so they can actually figure out, hey, you know what? All right, babe, I'll see you back at whatever. All right. Or just come back whenever you go. Because I have that trust. Right. So if you've been burned, if you've been emotionally hurt, physically hurt, mentally disturbed, you're going to have all those things if you don't deal with it. And this is why I'm taking it all the way back to the beginning of the conversation. I say education. You got to know that there is something that's going to impede you from being successful in your future relationship. If you don't have the understanding that there's something that's going to stop you from being successful, then you're just going to take everything with you like it's okay.
Right.
But because I say we being black men, we don't have I haven't had a person that came to me that was black until recently and was like, hey, we need to make sure that you're going to be the best version of Tim that we can have.
Okay.
I was like, ooh, okay, I'll do that. And I'm 42. So that means I literally, probably in the last couple of years, was just like, all right, I want to be the best version of me. What does that look like? Right. So that means I had to go to the beginning, right? I first have to say, I want to. That's the biggest thing. I want to. And I have to accept help. I just watched a movie called The Forge.
Is that a Christian movie?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I didn't know it was a Christian movie. But when I looked at it, what I saw that attracted me was black men mentoring other young black men. Because I feel like that's my mission, part of my gifting, part of what I'm doing, all this stuff. So it's like, okay, so I got to see this. So I'm looking at it, and I'm like, man, we are so much more successful when we do things together than we do separately. And it's so sad that we, as black men, want to step on one another instead of bring each other up. I've said this for years. Why can't we work together? And it's the idea that I need to step on one or be better than one person in order to bring another person up. And I think this always starts in the beginning. And it's education. And it's simply saying, hey, let me show you why this is what it is, right? So you were talking about how girls and women can always have another person, that they always have somebody to confide in. Right. We have to understand that they are cool with sharing how they feel with one another. We are not.
Not at all.
We are not going to be, man, let me tell you, oh, girl really broke my heart. Man, get over that soft stuff. Blah, 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 blah. That's what's going to happen at the end of the day.
That's why we don't do it, though.
Because when we actually make ourselves vulnerable, now we get shut down. And it doesn't just happen from men, it happens from our women.
Yep.
Because the expectation there is, why are you acting like that? You supposed to be the man, blah, 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 blah. Right? So you got all these things that you're feeling on the inside that you have to hold on to, that you have to keep in. Because if you dare open up any window of vulnerability, you're going to be attacked. So the fine line here, Eric, is having the education part, coupling that with somebody who cares about being able to talk to you through your emotions, through your trauma. That way you can come out on the end to be the best version of you that you can be. So
great. Man, you definitely put a lot of things into perspective. I definitely resonated. It resonated well with me. There's another thing though beyond relationships too that I think that is attached to childhood trauma is in our community the violence that we deal with. Not in all of our communities, because that's one thing that, for me, honestly, I get tired of hearing that. No, I don't want to buy another car right now. But that's something that I get tired of hearing a lot of, is that we kind of all get clumped into like this one ball of like unsuccessful dysfunction as Black people, right? We don't necessarily get our different archetypes of characteristics of who we are, because we have a diverse range of personalities, we have a diverse range of culture, and all of the above, from education on down. But for some reason, we all get put into one big ball of dysfunction. That's not always true, because that puts us in a place where does the help come from? Where does the help come from? So what I'm getting at is, with the violence that has spawned from all of the trauma that we've dealt with, these cycles of abuse, we have so many young Black men out there and women who are so conditioned to violence to where does that end at? How do we get out of that? Because it's one thing to escape relationship, to fix relationship issues, but we have a whole group of African American people in a certain pocket of society that are very comfortable with violence. And it shows in the statistics. It shows every night when you turn on the news, no matter which major city that we go to, there is going to be somebody getting shot. There's going to be someone committing a crime. And that's why I say it's going to be so hard to escape the things that we're dealing with, because we got to dig from up out of that. And I got to understand too that that's not always something that we want it to happen. That's generational, and that comes from the racism in this country, the systematic oppression, and the things that we've had to deal with, from having lack of resources and being basically looked at as secondhand citizens throughout the history of this country. It's put us in places where violence has always just been a normal part of life. So we have a lot of people who are coming from that, and we got to break that somehow. What do you think about that?
Where do you get the information on the Black and brown community? So we're talking about the understanding that the way that we deal with things mostly are done in violence.
Mm-hmm.
Why? When you look at it, right? We have numbers. Where do the numbers come from? Where do we get our stats from?
We get our statistics from a lot of different sources, empirical for the most part, such as FBI statistics. And that report shows Black on Black violence, Blacks to other races, and white on white violence, and all different. It breaks it down through different races.
So you
said that would be the most empirical place to where you would get those numbers from, the people who actually do it.
The numbers, cool. So you said condition, right? Condition from where?
I'm sorry, say it again.
You said I said condition from where? Where did we get
The condition from?
the violence of condition? How did we become this violent race?
I don't think we're a violent race. I think we have issues with resource competition more than anything, because being crammed into cities for so long, where crime breeds itself because of lack of education, lack of opportunities, that's what creates the conditions for violence. And that happens anywhere. And those things, that's why I mentioned that this is not all something that's our fault, but it is our problem that we have to fix in our inner cities, because people are just used to it by now. It was a design to put us in those situations. It's just what happens with resource competition in any place that you go to. So that's one thing that has to be tackled, is the fact that we have too many people in our inner cities that are crammed in together, and they need different opportunities. They need more resources. We need, instead of sending that money across to Pakistan every year, that money needs to go into our inner cities to stop the crime, to give these kids opportunities, because they're literally dying for opportunities. We have great people in our inner cities. We have great people all across the board. And it's a damn shame that we have to deal with this issue that's been going on pre-60s. Where do we learn how to be violent from at best? The violence of this nation, right? One just doesn't lose violence when it was afflicted upon you. I mean, that's what we've been talking about this whole time, is cycles of trauma. We have generational cycles of trauma that go back 300-400 years. So when I hear people talk about how violent we are, I say, hey, well, look in the mirror. How violent were you?
This is why I brought it up. So, in my opinion, I believe that the answer to this situation is also being able to be coupled with education, and also being able to be coupled with tools and resources. So I say that because we have been systematically brought into a nation, a place that has put African Americans, brown people against each other.
Yeah.
It's the system that we have been put in. We weren't put in this system to succeed. We have not been in this system to be anything but guided as this is me, as from what I've seen, from the studies, the research that I've looked at, as a volatile race. And I say that because so many things, especially starting from the 80s, just really looking at the crack and the cocaine epidemic, the way that it was led from literally from the top down, president down, like the system itself. It was basically enabled to have people who were white, they could do one thing.
They do whatever they want.
And then the people who were not, and I'm going to say the people who were not, had to follow a certain way of doing things when it came to the drug situation. So therefore, you're systematically put in to something that you really don't have any control over, because it's a law now.
Right.
So you have to operate in this law. Otherwise, you become a slave. In other words, you become a person who is in jail.
Yep.
Did you
a new slave?
Did you know basically when you go to jail, you're now a slave?
Yeah. Yeah, that's how it's designed.
And that is what we end up talking about, which this is what I teach my youth. I said, you need to look at the Fifth Amendment.
Right.
You need to be able to read these things because it's there for you, but you won't know that unless somebody is educated. Right? So I can give you the tools, but if you're not educated in which tool to pick up, if I tell you to go to the 15th Amendment, what's the difference? If I tell you to go to the 6th Amendment, what's the difference? What are you looking for? You got to have the resource, and the resource is a teacher. So you have a person who can teach you, right? But you have to be taught correctly.
Who's the biggest teacher in the African American community? Men. And where are the men? Not around. It's this cabal of just trouble for us that we have to work hard at. We're not going to be able to save every child.
I think I wouldn't use that term racism out in this part,
Okay.
I would actually use systematic separation.
Systematics. Okay. I like that.
Because in the beginning, as slaves, with old master, what we have to do, the men had to go out and do the work. The women and children, they went over here, right? So that's when it really started. And if you really think about it, so when we get together with one another, the women had one thing to do. That was to take care of the kids, right? You didn't really see us traditionally saying, hey, let me come in, let me train up this young boy, let me train up this young girl. Hey, this is what you need to be doing. It was always the women, right? So there was never a point where you saw for black and brown people a really great demonstration of two people in the household, two people together raising a family. Another black man,
I'm gonna give you that.
another woman.
I'm gonna give you that. That's an aha moment for me because I've always, how you get like tunnel vision. You always connect the separation of black families to the housing movement back, I think, in the 40s and 50s, where they purposefully separated black people through the housing structures by saying men couldn't live here if women and children would receive benefits. That was all dedicated towards disrupting the black family. But yes, I mean, I know about the separation of family back to history, but for me, I think you just close that gap because it shows that during this whole country, the making of this country has never wanted a black family.
No,
has never wanted a black family.
Once we did, and I think I would take it back even further to Jim Crow, right? You got a major gang of African Americans. You get all these people in one place, but because we are mentally shackled, right? We don't have the mental capacity, the knowledge to say, this is 10 masters or one white person. You mean to tell me I can't get my 1,000 brothers over here to get it together to where we can, hey, let's stand up on our own 2 feet, right?
But it happened. We actually had many points within the history of this country where we stood up on our own 2 feet, separated, and actually had a thriving society. It's been many different points within our society I can show you,
but then
especially Tulsa.
But then what
because
happened?
When you come together and you're doing something, they don't like it and they destroy it.
There you go.
So yeah. So
there you go.
So I mean, for me, and this
we
channel,
had our own money.
Yeah.
We had I know.
This channel is not all about our plight. It's a channel that's about everyone. I want other people, out there to, eat white people, Mexican people, anyone. I mean, Hispanic people, anyone, Asian. I want everyone to come in here and tell their stories when they want to and share and be a part of this community. But when we're talking about African American experiences and stuff, I mean, I hope that people will still want to join, but this is just the truth. If you can't accept the truth of the history of this country, then it's going to be pretty hard for you to have a logical conversation. Because we're not saying, and I think that's the thing that a lot of different people say, is that, they always got an excuse for something. Two things can exist at once. This can be true, and it doesn't mean that we want an excuse, and we are still fixing it at the same time. This is not a cry for help. We're stating the obvious that men need to be that we need to bring more men into our communities. That's why we need to come together. But not just to fix the wrongs of the past, to save our children for the future, because the violence situation, pregnancy, the drug addiction, all these things that our kids are going to run into, all it takes is for one male in a community that they look up to and need and look forward to as an example that changes their whole outlook, that makes those choices non-existent. And I can say that because it was a guy growing up who helped me out. So, I mean, that's what we are missing. And that's why I wanted to bring it up. I know it seemed like we were segueing into like the whole historical thing, but no, the trauma that we deal with as a culture, the things that our children deal with, the things that are dysfunctional in our culture, they come from something. The root of that evil is still there, and we need to break that up. No matter what, men need to be more in the communities, because even in some of the programs that I've had the pleasure of working in, I've seen change in kids just by having a connection with me, right? They look up to me. They come when I walk through the door. They run to me like I'm their dad or their brother or something like that. And that's change. Because when we are, as young people, if we're accountable to adults and we respect adults and we example them. And that's what we're missing. We could change a lot by doing that. But yeah, man.
Well, let me give you one formula, and then you got to wrap
okay,
up.
yeah, yep.
And I equate this to, I call it my 3 R's.
Okay.
When you have a young mind in front of you, you have to build rapport. So that means I have to establish a meaningful connection with that person, right? Mm-hmm. So, and then after I establish that rapport, I then build a relationship.
Right.
So after I built a relationship with you, I can then become a person who you trust. So ultimately, you'll end up respecting me at the end. So if I can build rapport with you, build a relationship, and then have your respect, I can teach you the things that you need to know in order for you to be successful.
Amen. Man, so thanks for coming out. I really appreciated the conversation. That is what Club Geneva is all about, having some conversations, some meaningful discussions, just trying to push things forward in a positive way. I really respected a lot of the different things that you spoke about today, man. It made a lot of sense. But yeah, so everyone out there, thank you for viewing. I'm your host, Shay, and this is Club Geneva. And if you want to contact me or be on the show, all you have to do is hit me up at the email address below. That's clb.geneva@gmail.com. Please reach out. We want people to comment. I want to reach out and connect with you. I can bring you into the studio virtually. So if you want to be on the show, all you got to do is reach out to me through email. I'll send you the form. You fill it out, and then I'll buzz you in on the show. I'd love to have you. But Tim, would you like to go ahead and wrap it up?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Thanks for giving out.
Did I put you on the spot?
What was I supposed to say?
You can just wrap it up by saying, thanks for having me. If you want to come to my detail shop, if you want.
Okay. Yeah. Again, thanks, Eric, for having me. I do a lot of things. I'm a DJ. I do personal car detailing and security. Also, if you need somebody to come speak to the youth, that's also what I do too. I appreciate you, man. And God bless you.
All right, man. Check it up. Appreciate you.
Yeah.